Welcome, everyone. My name is Patrick Lucas. I'm the founder of the Indigenous Youth Mountain Bike Program and a community planner specializing in tourism, recreation, and trails in BC. And this evening's webinar is Recreation and Stewardship, the Kwantlen story. So we're going to be having a conversation between the members and representatives for the Kwantlen First Nation in BC and the Blue Mountain Motorcycle Club. So this is going to be a discussion around stewardship, land guardians, and how can recreation clubs support Indigenous peoples to assert their rights and title and their creator-given role as the caretakers and stewards of their lands. I think it's going to be amazing. Webinar is being hosted by the Outdoor Recreation Council of BC. The Outdoor Recreation Council of BC works on behalf of 60 provincial and regional member organizations and represents more than 100,000 individuals, as well as the general public, to support enjoyable outdoor recreation for all. They advocate for access to and promote the responsible use of BC's outdoors for public recreation while building bridges between our diverse membership. Recreation and outdoor places are valued as essential to healthy individuals and vibrant communities, and that every British Columbian has access to meaningful outdoor recreation experiences. This evening, we have several guests who are joining us. We have Tim Dixon, who's a land guardian supervisor for the Kwantlen First Nation. We have Ryan Tom, president of the Blue Mountain Motorbike Club, Rick Green, vice president of the Blue Mountain Motorbike Club, and Kevin Vanderboom, a forest professional with Chartwell Resources Group, and someone who has worked with both the KC and the Kwantlen First Nation for many, many years. And of course, tonight's webinar wouldn't be possible without the support of our sponsor, the Real Estate Foundation of BC. So hands up to the Real Estate Foundation for supporting these important discussions and conversations. Thank you, Rick. And yeah, just so everyone knows, we are recording this webinar and it will be made available. It'll be put up on the YouTube channel for the ORC and for the IYMBP. We have a YouTube channel as well, the Trail Guys. Feel free to check it out. We've been putting up lots of videos of all the work that we do around the province.
Hey everyone, I'm Ryan, president of Blue Mountain Motorcycle. I've been with Blue Mountain for probably the last 10 years. I've been involved. Been riding there since I was 7. So yeah, it's definitely been a lifelong thing for me. So I couldn't be happier about the work we're doing up there. It's incredible. It's a gift to have, that's for sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Awesome. And Kevin, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Yeah, no problem. Kevin Vanderboom. I'm a registered forest technician. Been working with Kwantlen since about 2008. Been doing forestry work since about 2000. Got a great working relationship with Tim Dixon and other folks from the Kwantlen and KC Nation, as well as Rick Green and Ryan Tom. We've been in pretty constant communication about the activities that we're doing. My role for Kwantlen is to meet their annual allowable cut needs, to make sure all their permits and forest stewardship plans are being met. We got a pretty tight group on Blue Mountain. We work with our adjacent tenure holders as well. Yeah, not much to say except for that so far our relationships are great, and we got an interesting area that we work on. I mean, it's an urban interface that deals with wildfire concerns, recreational concerns, just a multitude of things that are going on. And it's encouraging to see that the Kwantlen have a guardianship program to help facilitate this. I think all of us, from Tim to Ryan and Rick, can all agree that communication is paramount. I think we've done a pretty good job at that, but we always know that there's room for improvement.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and get us back to regular stream. And there's Tim for a second there. Tim, I lost you. Perfect. Okay. So let's start the discussion. And I've got some questions here. I'm going to start some questions, but my hope is just to sit back and let you guys start talking. So by all means, feel free to jump in whenever you like. I'll be watching to see, who may want to talk. For those of you who are watching, please, by all means, start throwing some questions in the chat box or the Q&A. I'll be watching it. I'll also be watching the chat box for those who are able to access that. And I want to bring your questions in as soon as possible, because this is really about getting a conversation going. And I'm sure you have many burning questions for our panelists tonight. So let's get started. My first question is, Tim, I'd love to start with you. We were talking before, and you were telling me a bit about how Kwantlen is starting up a Lands Guardian program, and I'd love to just hear about it. Where are you guys with it? What's your hopes and the nation's vision for the Lands Guardian program? He might be frozen up. Oh, let's see here. There he is.
Oh, I'm having some troubles here. I thought it would be good. Nobody
There
else
we
has
go.
on the Wi-Fi in the house but me. So
Okay.
what was the question?
Oh, that's okay. The question, I just was hoping you could tell us a bit about the Lands Guardian program. Like, my understanding is that you're starting up the Lands Guardian program. That's kind of your role. So I'd love to kind of hear all about it. Where are you with it? What's the vision and hope for it? Tell us all about it, please.
Yeah, I mean, our vision and hope is really to just be a presence on the land and start allowing everyone to maybe see the earth and the land through our lens. Something that's maybe a little more holistic and looking for things that maybe benefit more ecosystem health, and even just areas that are special to the elders and traditional uses. Just things that people would normally see. That's a very important thing for us, and that's part of how we envision reclaiming a lot of the use of our land. It's a program that is just so open-ended. You can make it however you want to make it. You can take whatever path you want to take. And for me personally, this is a passion of mine. I mean, this is only the second year of my adult life I haven't had a motorbike, and thankfully I still have the other one. But this is something that's close to me. I grew up in the Lower Mainland, and I rode bikes all over. So this just seems like the easiest path to start. I mean, it's pretty cool.
Nice.
And so far we've been just kind of building a base of education for us. There's 2 other guardians, and I was very fortunate to work with Kevin for a little minute there. I think he would have preferred I stuck around a bit longer, but
Please.
we still get to work together now a little bit. But we're it's been fun getting more education about the land, not only from traditional universities and science, but also the elders, and seeing what they can teach us and implementing that. And just sharing that is a big vision for us.
Oh, that's amazing. There's so many questions I have about. I've been watching a number of different nations around the province that have been developing Guardians programs over the years, and I think it's amazing what they're doing, and I think it's a model that a lot of nations should be working on. Kevin, I'd love to jump over to you. You've worked with Kwantlen for a while, I take it, as a forester. Do you interact at all with the Guardians program, and like, what's your experience with that? What is your understanding of that?
So like Tim said, I mean, they're getting this off the ground, but without being provided a mandate, I always felt that there was services that I provide that the Guardians could learn. So there's lots of, again, wildfire prevention, thinning, pruning, road maintenance. I mean, the Guardians are kind of, the eyes in the forest, along with, trail riders like Blue Mountain and Fraser Valley Motorcycle Club as well, who, these clubs are using this area, and we're there, and we have plans for, reforestation and harvesting and all these other things. But when you work with the other stakeholders in the area, you can find out the places where attention is needed. So Tim and I have spoken about this a little bit, and others, council members and the like. You got to get to a certain capacity where they can do these things. But I've always felt that my role was to get the Guardians involved in things that they had the time to do, tree planting, all these different activities, sharing the knowledge that not only they know, but that a forester like myself might know as well, or what we're hearing from the other clubs that are in the area. So a lot of it is going to be fluid. It's going to change with what resources are available. But in everything I do for Kwantlen, there's always a aspect that involves the Guardians at some point. So we have to refer all the activities that we do to other nations, to other stakeholders like Blue Mountain Motorcycle Club and Fraser Valley Motorbike Association. So we refer our activities of what we're doing, and the more that we can learn from the elders, from the Guardians on what we're doing and where our aspirations are to meet their forestry obligations, whether it's silviculture, whether it's harvesting, that helps us make smart decisions. So by working with all these groups, it just it helps me do a better job. It helps me facilitate what they need. It helps us to control erosion, drainage, all these things. So there's a multitude of resources that you're trying to manage, and the more that you communicate this with these other user groups, the better you can do your job and the better they can do their job. And you're also being more efficient because you're sharing those needs at the same time. So if someone needs a heavy machine in the area, well, you communicate when you have one there because you're doing road building. If there's archaeological services that are needed by one group, you communicate so that you're servicing their needs as well as your own for the Kwantlen Nation to manage their woodlot. That being said, the area is finite. So you only have so much area in the woodlot to meet your legal obligations. So you have to be you have to be smart with those decisions. And the more I learn from these other groups, the more it helps me make sure that you're kind of managing biodiversity, you're managing recreational activities, you're doing all those things, and you're trying to share those resources while still maintaining a fiber resource that essentially is going to get cut. I'm kind of the bad guy in the group, that the one that's out there, doing the harvesting. But when we can facilitate all those things at the same time, that's how you achieve, proper forest stewardship on a defined area-based tenure. And that's why I'm a big advocate for area-based tenures, because you're thinking long-term, you're being smart about your decisions.
That's a great overview. Thank you, Kevin. I mean, so many decision factors go into all this. I'd love to bring in Ryan and Rick from the Blue Mountain Motorbike Club at this point. So maybe, Rick, we can start with you. Maybe tell us a little bit about the Motorbike Club. Who is the Blue Mountain Motorbike Club, and give us a little bit of a background.
Well, the club has been around for about 20 years, as far as I understand. And we recently in 2020 got what's called a Section 56 under the Forest and Range Practices Act, and got a staging area finally after many years. And a couple of things I was going to touch on is that in 2009 there was some funding through the National Trails Coalition, and the club had a report done, a hydrology report. Basically, somebody walked through every foot of every trail and kind of noted where there's, should be a bridge, should be a closure, should be a reroute, etc., all of that. So currently there's over 150 bridges up on the trail system up there. Pretty much anywhere that touches water or touches a swampy area has a bridge crossing, so that we keep the bikes out of the water, and help preserve the wildlife that's in there. And the other piece that Kevin had touched on was about fire management. And every year there's the clubs, the dirt bike clubs, ATV clubs, and the snowmobile clubs have access to funds from an ORV fund. Basically, when somebody purchases a dirt bike, ATV, or snowmobile, they pay a registration through ICBC. And eventually each year those funds, a portion of those funds, become available to clubs to apply for. One of the things we're applying for this year is to get some brush cutting training, to learn how to better manage the brush to alleviate risks of wildfire, because that's a big concern for us, and it's a big concern for everybody involved on the mountain. And we're also going to get one of those fire danger rating signs for just past our staging area, so that people are aware of the status of the fire danger on the mountain at the time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rick. And that kind of leads really nicely into one of the first questions that we've gotten here. Someone was asking, how does stewardship and motorized recreation exist? And I really think that's a great question. We should talk about that a bunch more. And so I wanted to bring this to Ryan. Ryan, love to have you jump in here. What's your background with the Blue Mountain Club? I'd like to learn a little bit more about Blue Mountain. Like, where is Blue Mountain? How is it? How is it situated within Kwantlen First Nation's territory, lands and territories? And that can go to Tim, but I'd like to throw that out to anybody. But Ryan, why don't you jump in there and tell us a little bit about your connection to the Blue Mountain and your history with the club?
So for me personally, Blue Mountain is where I grew up. I was lucky enough to live about 4 doorsteps away from the McNutt Road gate, which allowed me unfettered access to it for most of my childhood life. So it began early with me there. It was a way to solve problems in a fairly healthy manner. You have a rough day as a kid, you get on your bike, you go blow some steam off, you come back home, you're great. And so that's a continuing thread into my adult life. I rode there with my dad. I now ride there with my kid. It's something that we've tried to keep as a constant in our life, as a way for me to reconnect where I grew up, and for my kid to have a connection with me of things that we can do together. So those things can't happen without the trail network and the land itself. And so as you age and mature, and you just have to start thinking in terms of sustainability and not just doing what makes you feel good, you realize that if we're going to have a space for this to happen, then there has to be a cohesive plan to keep that happening. And so the logical place for me was to get involved was with the club. And initially it was sort of from an outsider looking in, it was an unorganized group of ragtag motorcycle people. And once you get involved and start to get to know all these people, you find a lot of really strong, passionate people about what they do. And you have to, once you have that group, now you have to get your group to work with everybody else. You realize how many other people are out there on that same land base. And this kind of goes back to what Kevin said about having the conversation, having the communication. It's been really important to view it through the lens of what can we do for each other, because when you initially come onto the scene, you have industry on one hand, and they have their mandate, and then we have our recreation industry. We're trying to have fun. That's our brand. We want to have fun. And once we figure out that we both have the same point of sustainability as sort of our goal, then it becomes a lot easier to work together. Breaking down those barriers of talking with people in industry as a recreationalist, you feel like you're bargaining from a bit of a lower position. And then once you get to know these guys, you find out that we're all working towards the same goal. And it's just a matter of keeping that conversation open and how can we help each other. So the club's sort of grown around that philosophy. We've been able to get some really good people involved in the last 5 to 10 years, and it's expanded. Our ridership burgeoned incredibly with the start of the pandemic. You know, everybody got locked out of the bars. Go outside. The outside beckoned and people answered, and we've been playing catch up ever since. But I think we've had some really incredible opportunities in the last few years, so we've done some great work. So we're looking forward to more of it.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan. So we're almost 25 minutes in. I want to get into the meat of the topic now. And what I think what a lot of folks are really interested in, and even in everything you guys are saying, I think it really echoes and resonates with the conversations that are happening within the mountain bike community, which is where I kind of come from. And it's really about how do we build relations with First Nations? How can the recreation community engage with and partner with First Nations and help them move their stewardship goals, their rights and title, and help them steward and care for their lands and territories. So Tim, if I can come back to you? I'd love to know a little bit about, like, how does Blue Mountain situate or fit into Kwantlen's territories, and what kind of, have you guys worked together yet before, or are you working currently with the Blue Mountain Motorcycle Club on these issues? How does that look?
Kevin's been handling these relationships up until this point. Drew Atkins, he's also been part of that as well. But as far as the Woodlots location, it feels pretty smack dab in the middle. It's just to the right of it, the east, you got Stave Lake, which is very important to us. That's where over 30,000 belongings have been found, including a woven basket and many things. I was actually up there a couple of weeks ago finding quartz flakes from points. And then just west of that, you get the pit. You've got the pit coming down as well. And the area is just so rich with history. You're pretty hard pressed to walk through that area and not see modified trees and just signs and evidence of the history and the culture. And yeah, so it's right in the middle there. Yeah, I actually haven't even met Rick and Ryan before. I've done some work with Kevin, kind of on some of the trails and stuff. We were taking down an unsanctioned cabin put up by some hooligans, but yeah, I think I'd like to actually pass it on to Kevin for that.
Okay, perfect. Kevin, why don't you jump in there and give us a little bit of that history?
Yeah, so Tim's correct that whole area between, it'd be great if we had a map here, but unfortunately don't. But between Alouette Lake and Stave Lake, you got a pretty big swath of, I don't know, about 20,000 hectares or so, unceded territory of the Kwantlen and Katzie First Nation. The Kwantlen Woodlot is about 600 hectares, if I'm not mistaken, and the Kwantlen and Katzie First Nation woodland license, which was awarded in around 2018, which encompasses that area, is much larger. So the Kwantlen Woodlot has a cut about 5,000 cubic meters a year. The Kwantlen Katzie First Nation woodland license has a cut of about 17,000 cubic meters a year. So that area was fully logged. Besides some trees that weren't taken, it was all harvested 100 years ago. We've managed to identify some culturally significant cedar trees for bark stripping. We've been able to take the nations and the elders and the community members out bark stripping over the years. We found a few trees large enough for canoe logs, but for the most part, that old growth desired forest doesn't really exist, except for at the tops of mountains. My relationship with Blue Mountain Motorcycle Club and the Fraser Valley Mountain Bike Association has been mainly through referrals, which also deals with surrounding First Nations that have other issues around culturally significant plants, lots of those things. So those are the things that you're trying to manage, and that's where the referrals come handy. Me and Ryan and Rick, we pre-work, we talk. I don't think they're always happy with the activities we have. I'm not always happy with having to try and facilitate these things. It's not that easy. You have other desires of the nation. Both Kwantlen and Catesy would love to hunt on this same land base that has these trails, and that brings a safety hazard that you have to deal with. You don't want to start gating up all these areas. But for both Kwantlen and Catesy, their tenureship has been relatively new. So I would say that the Blue Mountain Motorcycle Club has had more of a presence in the area than Kwantlen and Catesy have. So you're dealing with a group that has unceded territory, you know, their territory that's already been occupied by a user group that has gone through the proper channels of legalization with their what Rick talked about with their section 56. If I'm not mistaken, it always comes up as section 16 for me when I deal with permits and whatnot. But regardless, it says that you need to manage these trails in a certain way. So you're trying to manage trails legally, and you're trying to manage the desires of two nations that might go counterintuitive to what these user groups might like. So Tim's early in some of this. He worked with me. He's moved on with the guardianship. He's well aware of some of these things, but these aren't that easy to always coalesce. You know, I've discussed with Rick and Ryan a way to meet the needs of hunting on the landscape. You know, that's how you get it done. It's, you know, those referrals are there so that you can start this conversation early. Some people don't want to do that. They find other ways to manage the rules or the legal ways of doing things. My outlook is that I like hunting, I like dirt biking, so these are all things I like. How can I educate those groups on what I need to do as a forester to meet Kwantlen and Catesy's needs, and how can I meet their needs at the same time? And you're not always going to align. You try to do the best you can for all these groups, and that's the most you can do. But I mean, this area was heavily logged. You know, I see signs of it. I see corduroy roads that were used for logging in the past that are perfect dirt bike trails now, and they're also perfect areas for me to want to put my roads, because they've already disrupted the landscape. So why would I want to build a road that isn't already previously existed, which the dirt bikers are using, and now I have to, you know, violate an area that they've been previously enjoying. So these are conversations that you have to have. And I feel, as a representative for Kwantlen and Catesy, I just have to do the best I can and balance those needs with Kwantlen and Catesy and their recreational users without trying to make a hierarchy. But you know, it's sensitive. It's not easy. It's a tough job.
Yeah. I think everything that you guys are saying, it really captures a critical series of issues that are happening in the recreation space around the province. We're seeing, you know, there's changing legal requirements. So you have a club that has gone through the required legal proceedings. They've got their sections 56, maybe they've had it for quite a few years, and First Nations are asserting their rights and title. They're gaining tenureships. They're gaining regaining their title to the land, and it's a rapidly changing, and not everybody's sure how to handle it. And everybody wants to do it right. Like, we want to go out and we want to recreate, have fun, right? Ryan, as you were saying, we want to go out and we want to have fun, but we want to make sure we're doing it in the right way. We don't want to cause hardships for anybody. So I'd love to hear from Rick or Ryan, what are your experiences with working with Kevin and grappling with these issues? Other clubs are listening right now, and they're asking these questions. How do we do this? How do we engage with First Nations? How do we move this forward? What lessons would you impart to them?
I think have the conversation first. You have to ride a fine line. As a club, we have a ridership that we have a responsibility to. And we also have obligations with our partnership agreement with rec sites and trails. And both of those things have to fit within an agreement with other stakeholders in the land. And I think when we first entered into it, we sort of have the thought from the public that we're out there to destroy and damage and tear things apart. And we spend a lot of our time sort of pushing that idea backwards a little bit. Our desire has always been to fit in with the landscape, and certainly we're not there to stop anybody else from recreating or industry on the land. That's not our position as a recreation club. We have a little bucket of trails, I always say, and we'd like to keep those, and that's the direction we're coming from. We know that there's going to be, over time, there's going to be conflict, but I don't think we've ever really had any major conflict that we couldn't resolve. Particularly working with Kevin, we had a situation where he'd applied for some of that ORV funding that Rick spoke about to rehabilitate a trail. The day after we got the approval for the funding to do the work, we got the referral that that was potentially going to be part of the next harvest plan. So we had kind of pump the brakes, and now we got to get together with Kevin, and we put our project on ice for a bit until we could come up with a plan that worked for everyone. There's a solution for every problem up there. I firmly believe that. And I think as long as we have that conversation first before acting, and we take everybody's stakeholder concerns into consideration, I don't see any reason why it can't be achieved.
That's amazing. Thank you, Ryan. I think that's really important. I mean, I've worked with First Nations all over the province for the last 15 years. And I think that's consistently something they've always said to me is, come talk to us, let's have the conversation. Let's work through this in a good way. Let's listen twice, speak once, listen with an open mind. I think that really, really does go a long way. Rick, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. What has been your experience? Do you have anything to add to what Ryan was saying?
Well, it's been really good working with Kevin in particular, because if there's a cut block and it may cross over a trail, he'll kind of look at our map and maybe move it down a little so that the cut block ends at the trail. And then they'll come back the next time after the cut block has grown back, and then cut the other side, so that it's just a matter of just having conversation and working with each other. We've talked about some of the elders who want to get up there and hunt, and discussing places where they can go that's not going to be close to where the dirt bikers may be riding in times of the year. That's going to be, well, the dirt bikers aren't going to be up on these upper trails that time of year, and trying to work out something that works for everybody. Kevin's been really instrumental with making those connections for us. And we're hoping to meet some of the elders and talk to them and make the connections, because you make that personal connection, and then things always work out much better, because it's just like talking to a friend instead of having butting heads with people you don't know. If you know the people, then you can work something out, and something that's going to work for everybody.
And if I could jump in, Patrick, I mean,
Absolutely.
This is a lot easier with area-based tenures, right? Like I see there's a bunch of trail folks that are listening, and when you have a defined area, you could be smart about what you do. You can, save areas of biodiversity that also are maybe in areas where mountain bikers are, so there's less of an impact compared to a skidder or hoe chucker or whatever the case may be. But when your area is defined, you can plan it. You can nurture it. You can go to the First Nation and say, hey, we see this area over here that's got this biodiversity. We want to retain it. And there's, without getting too drawn in, there's a lot of things as foresters we have to do around wildlife retention areas, old growth deferral areas, and all these kind of cookie cutter shapes that we're supplied about areas that we need to manage. And when your area is defined, it's a whole lot easier to do. If you're dealing with trails that are on a corporate tenure license, like a TOCO or Interfor, and I'm not trying to say they're bad guys, but their incentives are different than what you're trying to achieve. Because I've got this area, I can, when Ryan's gone and Rick is gone and I'm gone, someone else will continue the work that we already started doing. So for the Guardians to step in and say, hey, we want to do this thing, we can all work together. If you have a license that's held by TOCO for 50 years and then Interfor has it, there's no continuity there. So if anything that I could say to any of the trail users or the rider groups that are listening, advocate for more area-based tenures. These are the economies that have all these different externalities that are all tied into each other. When you have these big groups, they're not as concerned about these things as smaller tenure holders have. And sometimes it's not that easy to deal with these conversations, but you can deal with it in the ways that Rick and Ryan and Tim and I have, and other folks from other stakeholders, Haney Horseman, other people that we've referred with. It's just that much easier. And when you're dealing with multiple thousands of hectares of a tree farm license or something, it's not that simple, and you're going to put gates up. We're actively harvesting in Kwantlen and Catesby's First Nation woodland license, and we're disrupting Blue Mountain trails. And we've communicated, we've had dialogue, we've had to shut down some of their trails. We haven't really liked it. I've told Rick and Ryan it was coming months ago, and now it's happening, but they understand what we're doing because we're talking about it. We're poring over maps. They're telling me which trails are their major priorities when they have their events. I know this stuff. So that's the way that you succeed and get things done. It comes at an added cost. We're fortunate in the Kwantlen Woodlot and the K&K First Nation woodland license that we're close to markets. We're right here in Maple Ridge. It's a different story in Burns Lake. It's a different story in some of these other places. So Kwantlen and Catesby are very, very fortunate. I'm not going to overlook that. And this area has been left alone for a long time, and it's very healthy. It grows big trees rapidly. So we got a lot of things that are really going for us on this landscape that help us grow trees quickly. We're not in a suppressed area where growing trees is a battle. We have that luxury. So we're very, very fortunate. And I know there's not a lot of woodlots, not a lot of community forests. I deal with this with the community forest and Hope too. It's not quite the same just bounty as Maple Ridge. It's just, honestly, it's a bountiful place.
Awesome. And that's a really interesting point, advocating for those area tenures. We do see that in other areas of the province where it's been working well. I have a question for anybody who wants to jump in on this. And I think particularly for Kevin and for Tim, a lot of clubs, people are asking in the chat and in the Q&A, and I get this question from a lot of recreation groups around the provinces. And I'd love to know, what would you like when a club comes to you and they want to start these discussions? What are the things, specific things you wish they knew, or things that they specifically did in terms of approaching a First Nation and creating a relationship? What is it that you really wish they knew when they came to start that? Tim, why don't we start with you? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Consistency is a big one. I know some of the other stuff I have to do with the Guardian stuff, the consistency just lays out so nicely. Every 2 weeks, you just send off that email hey, how's it going? What are the updates? Or this is what's coming down the pipeline. These guys have all done it and said it before. I mean, the communication, the trust, the consistency, it just, if those boxes can be checked and you have willing people that all have the same mentality, this stuff happens. It actually can.
I think that's a really good point, Tim. I hear that everywhere that I work. and I consistently say to clubs, engage early, engage often, and be consistent, and follow up on what you say you're going to do. Drop off those plans, stop in at the band office, talk to people, make that FaceTime, show up to Indigenous Peoples Day, really make that effort and put that time in. That can be hard for clubs like Ryan and Rick. I'm sure you guys know you're working your butts off. You're doing this off the side of your desk. You have limited capacity, limited resources, but man, that engagement can go such a long ways.
This and the same can go for us First Nations too. I mean, capacity is a big thing. That's why these guardianship programs are so neat. It's building that capacity, so we don't have to hire a forester to build these relationships all the time, right? We can work as a united team and have a real representative from the nation that can put in the time where some of these guys can't. I know for me, that's how I see this happening going on in the future. It's like, okay, I can pick up the slack. I can fill the gaps where these guys can't, for sure.
Yeah. One question we have from the group. This is from Sal Demare, actually. How's it going, Sal? Haven't seen you in a while. He was asking, has there been any thought of closing trail areas for First Nations hunting and animal wintering grounds and then opening them back after? Is there discussions around that for you guys? I'm fairly certain there are discussions around that in different parts of the province. Has that been part of your discussion going forward in terms of accommodating both the motorcycle club, the riding that you guys do, the events that you have, and the hunting interests and needs of the nation and the elders? Perhaps Kevin, you look like you want to jump in there.
Yeah, me, Rick, and Ryan spoke exactly about that. I take my directions from Kwantlen and Casey, and an elder was getting a little perturbed that he just, we were having to deal with these other initiatives, these other things, and he's like, I just want to hunt. Now, unfortunately, the game isn't quite there like we would hope, but regardless, in talking to Ryan and Tom, we were like, yeah, there's an obvious artery that we could shut down. Not necessarily shut as in like make a big gate, but just inform people, hey, this is what's happening. The elders are hunting from mid-September to mid-December. This is when the deer are in this certain location, and this is when they're going to do their hunting. And for me to communicate that to them is no problem. But I think as every trail group that's on here knows, there's rogue people who are going to do what rogue people want to do. I mean, Tim talked about how him and I had to take down a structure. There was a dozen fires in the forest, the charcoal leftover fire bits from them enjoying themselves in the forest. That terrifies me. Like, people are having open fires and building structures. Like, that freaks me out. I mean, if a fire was to start in Maple Ridge, we are not putting that out. Like, it's game over. So
it's our largest fear too, Kevin.
Yeah, exactly. And we've discussed too, shutting down activities when heat domes show up and stuff like that. So I'm not too worried about the user groups. Those are responsible people. It's the rogue people that enjoy the infrastructure that those user groups have created that are the anomaly and the hard part to control, and dealing with that trespass. That's the headache for both Ryan, Rick, me, Tim, all of us. That is by far the biggest thing to deal with. I know these guys are carrying garbage out. I know they're, doing the same stuff that I am. I know we have a invested desire, but it's the people who show up and do their thing and then leave that, they don't stay on the trails. They're ripping off wherever, causing issues. That's the hard part to deal with. So the respect thing I get from the clubs. It's the respect that Kwantlen and Casey and myself as a professional forester and Tim and the other users in the area that we don't receive from the people who are just out there having a good time and then leaving a mess.
I think that shows the strength of where we work so well together. I can think of any number of opportunities we've had to clean stuff up. I'll use the camper as an example. There was a brief period when the gate was left open due to the ILM construction. Someone blew a camper up in the middle of the power line roads there, and we cleaned it up. We made it disappear. It was an issue for about 3 days, and then it was gone. That was the whole group working together, and I think that proves the strength of the relationship that we've formed. That's the kind of stuff we want to see going forward. And whether it's a garbage issue, whether it's a trespass issue, whether it's road trail cutting, unauthorized trail construction, all those kinds of things, that's where we want to be involved at that level. We're not just there to ride. We're there to facilitate the sustainability of the area.
And that's where I know with us, this tenureship for Kwantlen and Casey at least has been relatively new, but we've been putting up signs so people know whose territory this is. Like, if you're going to come in here and you're going to dump garbage and whatnot, let it be known that it's Kwantlen and Casey's tenure that you're doing this on. I think it's important that people know that there's a tenureship owner that happens to be First Nation who has a holistic outlook on how to manage the forest, to have a different approach than what we're all used to. And we're hoping that some of that, as a Jiminy Cricket type thing, makes them feel bad if they're going to do nonsense. That's the best we could do. And with the Guardians, my hope, at least just my personal desire, is that there's more of a face to the landscape, so that they know this is who you're doing this to. These people are here, they're practicing their culture. It's just more in their face. And like a couple of people have pointed out, I can't be out there all the time. The riders aren't out there all the time. And that's where I think I'm hoping that the Guardians could fill some of that void with, a storm occurs. How are the roads doing? They're checking up on it. Just a land-based involvement where they're on the land more than maybe all these other groups that are around. And they have a presence, and people know whose presence that is.
Yeah, that's a huge goal for us. I mean, that's the basis of the whole land guardianship program, is being a presence, letting people know what they're doing and where they're doing it. And yeah, there's no sour taste in our mouths for any of that stuff. I mean, we're okay picking up some garbage, but yeah, definitely it's nice that people know who they're doing it to, for sure.
And I think you're all hitting on something really important here, where in the mountain bike community and the trail building community, we're having a lot of discussions around this. And one thing I keep hammering to, particularly to the non-Indigenous folks who are recreating on land, is you can support the land guardians by being their eyes and ears and stewards on the ground. Like, you guys working to take care of those trails and doing it in a way that fits the cultural protocols of the nation. Like, you guys care about the land. You want to make sure it's being used in a good way. That's one space where we can actually work to support the First Nations as they assert their titles on the land, as they assert, they develop their guardians. We can actually be allies in really practical ways. And that's really something we're thinking about. So we're coming down to the last 8 minutes. We have one more question that I think is really good here. I really wanted to raise it from Janine Sebastian. And she mentions, what about forming a branch of your association within the First Nation community? And we do this, like, my entire program, the Indigenous Youth Mountain Bike program, was born out of that idea of like working with First Nations and actually getting Indigenous youth out on bikes. And it actually changed quite drastically. Like, when I first went to First Nations and started working with them, I kind of came to them with my own idea of what mountain biking would look like. And over 10 years, I really changed how we do things. Like, we build trails, we build it so that they can use it in the way that they see fit. And some of the mountain bike, and some of them do, they use it for language teaching, cultural teachings, gathering medicines, gathering different materials. So we kind of indigenize the way we approach our sport. And now First Nations are mountain biking. And I'm wondering, is there any work within the Blue Mountain Motorcycle Club or some of these other clubs that are listening? Is there efforts to, partner with First Nations, get youth out riding? Because I know a lot of First Nation folks who love motocross and are out riding. They're absolutely out doing it, and they're really good at it.
I think it's an opportunity we would welcome. I think, as always, as a recreational group, we're never sure where to start, and it's a matter of how do we open that up. And again, I welcome the opportunity, and I think this is a great place with the Guardian program. There's an opportunity there for sure. I would welcome that.
Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think partnerships bring a lot to the table because
you might need to turn off your video there, Tim, and just go with audio. That might help you.
Forces everyone.
Unfortunately, he's breaking up. I'm assuming he's saying it's a great idea. Tim, if you can hear me, maybe try turning off your video. You might have to sign out and sign back in. We're coming to the end of our time anyways, but I do think there's a huge opportunity there. Hey, Tim, you're back.
Brutal. Well, Ryan, Rick, and Kevin has really set myself up for the easiest transition into doing something like that. I mean, the legwork that they've already done with Kwantlen well before I even was around has just made conversations like this and opportunities like that open and available. There's a lot of stuff that I would probably thought I would have to do or look into, but these guys just check all those boxes and we can jump in with 2 feet if it's something that chief and council support, and logistically we can make sense, because at the end of the day we're both living off of funding, right? And so there has to be ways to work that into it all, and if us joining together makes sense, then absolutely, right? There's a lot of that too.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim. Okay, so we're down to our last 5 minutes. I'd love to hear just some closing thoughts from each of you. What do you hope to see come out of this? What is the one thing you'd like the audience to take away from this? Let's start with Rick. You haven't spoken in a little while. Why don't you jump in here and what are your closing thoughts on this evening?
I think it's been brought up before, but having the conversation and keeping the communications open is the biggest part of it. When I was first involved, like the connection with the First Nations wasn't really prominent in most of the riders' minds. They just are out riding, and now we're seeing more and more how important keeping that connection and communication open is. And Kevin's been a great connection for us because of the Kwantlen and the Kwantlen Casey woodlots. He's got those connections that makes the path for us to be able to connect to them, which is fantastic for us. So it's something we're working on because it's fairly new to us, but it's something that we've got the path open, and that's something we leave open for sure.
Awesome. Ryan, how about you? Any final thoughts for this evening?
Yeah, I think this has just opened a couple more doors. It's Rick and I have talked at length over the last couple of years. We've spoke with Kevin regarding the two. Like we don't know where to start the conversation. We know trails. We know how to build trails. We know we got a great spot to do it within. But making the connections. To be honest, like sometimes for us, we'd be a little fearful to approach, right? And so we've used Kevin as our conduit for that, because he's got such a great working relationship and he's been easy for us to work with. I would like to build on that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Kevin, why don't we take it to you?
Yeah, I mean, First Nations folks, it takes time. Trust takes a long time to get, and I had to work at it, and then I feel like Blue Mountain had to gain my trust to get Kwantlen and Cates's trust. So trust is not easily earned. It takes time. It takes, demonstration about doing the right thing. We've fortunately designated areas for cultural management zones, which have a smaller footprint, smaller opening sizes for cut blocks and clear cuts. All those types of forest management help facilitate other things like trails. If you're limiting 400 hectares of your First Nation woodland license, to a small 1% removal, so like 4 hectares a year, well, I can talk to the group and find out where their trails need to go. We can look at areas that we're already retaining for other values, wildlife, biodiversity, whatever, and we can have those interlock with each other. So I can't emphasize that enough about how much a good management plan, a good forest stewardship plan, a good woodlot license plan, all those things allow you to facilitate all the stuff that Tim and Ryan and Rick are talking about, all these other externalities. So that's a big part of it. And we pinpointed those things early on, and it's helped us ever since. So, that's been a catalyst.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kevin. Great thoughts. Tim, final word to you, Tim, final word to you. What, any final takeaways or thoughts for this evening?
My internet keeps me in it. Yeah, no, this has been great. It's been really nice connecting with Ryan and Rick. I guess they're gonna have to take me riding soon. And yeah, no, it's been good seeing Kevin again. Haven't seen him in a little bit. So yeah, it's been fun. I think opportunities like this are super cool. It's a conversation that you're not going to be able to show up at Starbucks for. So it's really special. And I appreciate Louise and you and reaching out to me and helping get this start, and all you other guys for participating. I mean, yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Well, and that brings us to the end. Thank you so much, you guys, Rick, Ryan, Kevin, Tim. Thank you so much for coming on and having this discussion. These conversations aren't always easy, but they're so critical to have. I really think there's practical ways for us to move forward and build relationships and foster authentic reconciliation in the recreation space. Thank you, everybody out there, for joining us. Just so you know, the outdoor, there's a really exciting, another webinar coming up, being hosted by the Real Estate, or supported by the Real Estate Foundation, UNDRIP and U. So that's the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and what the UNDRIP means for Indigenous people, means for nonprofits, foundations, and local government. So that's a great opportunity to learn about that. I'm definitely going to be joining that if I can. And yeah, please, if you want to learn more about what I do with the Indigenous Youth Mountain Bike Program, I often, through the Outdoor Recreation Council, will have meetings with recreation groups that want to learn more about the work that we do and the lessons that we've learned in the last 15 years of building relationships and trails with First Nation communities. So feel free to reach out. You can check out our website, iybp.ca, the Outdoor Recreation Council, ORC.ca, I believe. It's out there. It's easy to find. Also, and a big thank you to the Real Estate Foundation for supporting these webinars and these conversations. Hands up. Thank you so much. And thanks again, everybody. This recording will be made available to everybody and sent out to everybody who registered. Thank you again, guys, for joining us, and hope to see you all again soon. Take care.